Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Mitch. Good Thursday morning to you all. Hope you guys are waking up and having a wonderful start to your day, and I hope everyone's been having a great week out there so far. There is a good bit to discuss in this morning's video, as we do have the return of a risk of significant severe weather. I know that pretty much counters what I said a couple days ago, but I will say this: I don't think today or over the next few days, which we'll speak on also, is going to bring any kind of outbreak or anything like that. This is more so what we call like mesoscale days, just kind of smaller areas that we have to watch. And sometimes they can overachieve, and then sometimes they don't do a whole lot of anything, but we still got to figure it out. And that's what we're here to do. So the first thing we'll discuss is current conditions, latest outlooks, talk about the Storm Prediction Center outlook for you folks. And then we'll break down the country section by section. We'll spend extra time on Oklahoma and Texas, where we are expecting the risk of strong to severe storms. And the big risk for today is very large hail. I wouldn't be surprised if we get an upgrade to an enhanced risk just driven off hail itself. So we'll speak on that, spend more time on that when we speak on today's forecast. And then we'll switch gears and speak on the days to come through the weekend. What's the pattern looking like? I really think we'll continue to have light flow across areas of the Central Plains. This will continue to bring us a risk of strong to severe storms. How high end will these threats be? Like I said, I don't expect any sort of outbreaks, but we just got to watch each individual day and see how it trends leading up to that day. And just in the middle of that, we'll just speak on the pattern in general as we get into next week. We'll nerd out with you guys a little bit and just spend some time pretty much speaking on the last little bit of May out ahead of us into early portions of June. So if you guys have not subscribed, certainly consider doing that. Like the video if you like it. If anybody has anything that I can pray about or pray over, please put it in the comments below. Stay tuned towards the end if you want to join us with a Bible devotion. Let's get rocking and rolling. So this is current conditions. We continue to have this pesky spin, bringing a lot of moisture across areas of New England, still the Great Lakes region, basically southern Ontario. Big slug of rain getting slung into southern New England. I do think some of this rain will mix with some heavy wet snow in the higher elevations of Vermont and New Hampshire. We'll spend a few seconds on that when we get to the Northeast timestamp there. Very interesting setup. It's rare, but it's not totally unheard of, but it's pretty wild. I'm interested to see some pictures, hopefully from this area for certain areas. If I lived up in New England, I would go check that out. But we continue to have a little bit of flow across areas of sort of the Mississippi Valley, east and west of it, and not really anything too significant with this. And then we have energy surging across the northern Rockies. Elsewhere is pretty quiet, some storm action dancing around the Gulf, but like I said, everywhere else is pretty chill this morning. The Storm Prediction Center outlook, a general risk of thunderstorms along the I-95 corridor stretching into the southern Alps. We'll have to watch some strong to severe storms in areas of Florida for this afternoon. And this is our big area to watch for today. Now, when I say big, like I said, not speaking on an outbreak or anything like that, but these storms could overachieve, and I'll speak on it a little bit more as we get closer. But slight risk here, a level 2 out of 5, and a marginal risk around that. Now, that's all. I'm pretty much gonna leave it at that right now, because when we get to the Southern Plains timestamp in this video, I'm going to break down this outlook in more detail. But right now, a level 2 out of 5 risk. I could see this uptrending to an enhanced risk here in the next hour and a half or 2 hours. We'll have to see. But moving to the excessive rainfall outlook, a couple areas to watch that run a 5% risk of flash flooding, but overall not a big deal at all. And then just giving you a look at the tropics, but there's nothing to speak on. No tropical development expected over the next 7 days, and I'm not seeing anything worth talking about. But since we are getting closer to hurricane season, they are issuing outlooks now. I will throw this in the videos pretty much for the foreseeable future, all the way till fall. But nothing to speak on with that. Watches, warnings, and advisories, it's pretty quiet. There's nothing really to talk about here. Now, unfortunately, tropical tidbits, which is typically what I show you guys when I'm breaking down the section by section throughout the country. It's being weird this morning. It's saying that my internet is having issues, but my internet isn't having issues. So we're going to have to use pivotal weather. So we'll spend a bit more extra time going through this, just because pivotal weather sections out everything a little bit more zoomed in, if you will. But as far as storms in the deep south and southeast today, the only area I would watch really is areas in Florida. See some storms popping up down here. Even looks like almost a supercell trying to develop in south central Florida. But we start to take this into, say, the late afternoon hours. We get some big thunderstorms trying to develop here in the southern peninsula of Florida. So, if you live south of Orlando down towards Miami, Fort Lauderdale, just be careful. Some powerful storms today. You have a marginal level 1 out of 5 risk of severe weather. These will sort of dance around, could become a flooding threat if they kind of move over the same areas. But just watch out for some storms down here in Florida. Could have some storms in southeast Louisiana earlier this afternoon. And maybe a little bit of rain shower activity into the northern sections of Alabama and Mississippi throughout the late evening and overnight hours. And could wake up to some showers, maybe even a storm here in the eastern sections of the Carolinas in the wee hours of the morning tomorrow morning. Now, kind of the mid-Atlantic, and we'll show sections of the Appalachian Mountains in this. Like I said, it's just going to be broken up a little bit differently than we're typically used to here. But we could have some storms on the bottom end of this upper low that's spinning around over areas of the Northeast right now. Could have some storms in the D.C., Baltimore area, into the Delmarva, the Tidewater this afternoon. So be mindful of that. Hey, they could produce some small hail. There is some cold air aloft nearby. So just be careful with that. And elsewhere, just some showers drifting around, not a big deal. Now, the Northeast, I'm going to actually switch it to just the precipitation type look instead of the reflectivity here. You can see that L over southern Ontario just setting up shop, just chilling, not really going really anywhere fast, but just areas of rain will continue to get pushed into Connecticut, Rhode Island, Long Island, Massachusetts, and then eventually areas of moisture will make it all the way into Vermont and New Hampshire, and you see these splotches of blue. This is snow falling. Way up in the higher elevations, you definitely need to stay tuned to your local people with that. But what's interesting is as we're getting into this evening, some rain begins to switch to some snow, even showing up in the Berkshires of western Massachusetts. And this is a nor'easter, basically. So windy conditions, heavy rain, nothing too outrageous, but this is what we were missing all winter in this area. We didn't really get one nor'easter at all. But this would deliver a lot of snow if it was winter, but it is not. Instead, it's just a cold, miserable rain for a lot of people. When we start to get into the early morning hours for tomorrow, look at the rain just switching to snow, heavy, wet snow too. But that's a sub 995 millibar low just creeping on up the coastline. And by the time we get into tomorrow, a lot of this energy will be moving up into Maine and New Hampshire with a little bit of leftover rain shower activity elsewhere over here. But snowfall, as you can tell, there's pockets of heavy snowfall accumulation, but you got to get up into some of these higher peaks and where you could get several inches of snow. Someone can even get maybe over 8 inches. It just depends on what your elevation is in this area. But getting down to the southern plains, we'll spend a little bit of the time on this here. We have a slight risk, level 2 out of 5 for southern areas of Oklahoma, a very small section of southwest Arkansas and northern areas of Texas. It does include Lawton, Wichita Falls, Dallas-Fort Worth area, Ardmore, Paris, into the Texarkana, Arklatex region. So what's driving this? And I will say, this could get larger. This could expand a little bit further north. We do have a marginal risk all the way down to San Angelo, all the way up to Norman, all the way back to almost Little Rock and Shreveport. But what's really driving this, the health threat, is really what's going to be the big risk for today, in my opinion. In the yellow, you have a 15% risk of hail exceeding 1 inch in size or larger, but in that black outline region, that is a 10% risk of hail exceeding 2 inch in diameter or larger. I think these storms will produce very large hail. It's just trying to figure out where they form for today, and we will take a look at some short-range model guides here in a second. But the damaging wind threat, that yellow, that is a 15% risk of winds exceeding 55 to 60 miles per hour. And the tornado threat, I think this will change for the day. I think there's a chance they'll put a 5% risk of a tornado inside of this green 2% risk, which, by the way, if you live in that green, that is a 2% risk of a tornado. So if anything changes with a tornado outlook, I could see this bumping up to a 5% risk of a tornado. That would show up in brown somewhere in here. So, they'll issue another outlook here in the next hour and a half, 2 hours, and I'll be sure to put that in the comments below, and I'll pin the comment so you can just click right on that site. But showing Oklahoma first, and then we'll drop down to northern Texas. This is starting off around lunchtime today, the time frames here. Got some storms already firing up here in northeast Oklahoma. And then we get to about 2 p.m., 3 p.m., we see a supercell developing between Oklahoma City and McAllister and Norman. We have to watch that right off the dot. It shows that kind of falling apart, and then more storms forming. There's some sort of boundary setting up shop here. These storms will latch onto a boundary, and that can actually put a spin in the atmosphere, creates more of an intense updraft situation. But look at this storm right on top of Norman, south of Oklahoma City. I'm telling you, not everybody's going to get rain in this area today, but if you do, you could get a nasty hailstorm. We got some storms popping up sort of around Wichita Falls over to just south of Childress. And you see these circles coming off these storms. This indicates intense updrafts. Doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get a tornado, but it could. It could mean that. It definitely could be an all hazards type situation. So we got these very intense supercells drifting south into southern areas of Oklahoma, starting to slip in the northern areas of Texas, and these could produce all hazards. Very, very large hail is possible with this. And then we start to get into 8 p.m. These start to hang out north and south of the Red River area, and could drop a lot of heavy rain too. And eventually most of this energy will make it into northern Texas, and I think southern Oklahoma begins to calm down around midnight tonight. But, as we start to get into Texas, this is starting off around 1 p.m. Our time frame is right here. 2 p.m., 3 p.m., 4 p.m., not a whole lot. 5 p.m., 6 p.m. Then we'll have to watch some storms to the north of the Dallas-Fort Worth and Abilene area. But listen, these storms could very well form a little bit further south before this time frame. This is 7 p.m., shows most of the storm action north of the Dallas-Fort Worth area. But as we were starting to get into 8 p.m., you just got to watch these storms, guys. I'm telling you. Could be a sneaky tornado threat today. And a lot of times, these little 2 to 5% risk perform better than these 10 to 15% risk of tornadoes. So even though the tornado threat isn't super high today, take it serious. 10 p.m., it shows these storms sort of weakening as they drift into the Dallas-Fort Worth area, but they could very well be much stronger than what this is indicating. This is around midnight. The storms are just now hitting the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So one thing that I will watch is, even though it shows most of the storms up here along the Red River, north and south of it, around 7 p.m., I want to see if more storms are actually into this region sort of earlier than what model guidance is indicating. That's one thing I want to watch for. If you look at the latest, say, this is the latest 09Z. So it shows the storms on this particular model run slipping into the Dallas-Fort Worth area a little bit earlier in the evening. This is 10 p.m. The other model I just showed you showed more so around midnight. So one thing you'll look at here is the updraft Felicity swath with one of the long-range HRRR model runs. And, it picks up on an intense supercell developing south of Oklahoma City into Norman, and then dropping south down this interstate corridor down to the Red River. And you just got to watch this. There's going to be probably 2 to 3, maybe 4 intense supercells out here. So just be mindful of these storms today. I know it's just a slight risk, but they could pack more of a punch than what a slight risk seems. Okay, so starting to get to about midday in the Central Plains, and like I said, we just watched those storms in Oklahoma and Texas, and a little bit of energy slips into northern areas of Arkansas, southern Missouri, but I think that'll just be some scattered downpours. A little bit of storm activity could slip into western areas of Nebraska. I have to watch for a sneaky strong to severe storm up there. But outside of that, not a big deal. And then we'll look at the north central U.S. and the Great Lakes region. We'll continue just to be plagued with shower activity into the eastern areas of lower Michigan, and we just a nasty, raw, showery day in in Ohio. Some showers will try to develop later this evening across the Midwest. Milwaukee could get some shower activity down to areas of Chicago, just Wisconsin, Illinois. So we'll watch for that, but no impactful weather. But this upper low just will not get on out of the way. In fact, it meanders around long enough to throw some showers back into the eastern sections of the UP and Michigan. So just can't get it out of the way. Now, the western U.S., we'll just have some energy cruising across the northern Rockies. This will bring maybe some rumbles of thunder, maybe some storm activity, then throw some heavy rain and moisture into the Rockies of Montana. this could equate to some heavy snow in the higher elevations. And then by the time we're into tomorrow morning, this energy begins to make it into the northern plains. So temperatures today, different look on it, different look at it. I know, like I said, tropical tidbits just giving me some issues, but it is going to be a cold day for late May standards for the Northeast. I mean, I'm talking about Boston might not get out the 40s, guys. I mean, you can tell that there's some sort of system overhead, and there certainly is, like we just broke down. But once you get into, say, Maryland, point south, it starts to feel more like spring. Once you get down to like southern Georgia, point south, and along the Gulf coastline, 80s and 90s, and the humidity is around. Well, a little bit of dry air has snuck into areas of the southeast, though. But even Ohio, a chilly day, Indiana. And then we look at the central U.S. This is what it looks like. Very hot, miserable conditions here in Texas, 90s to 100s, but more of a spring-like day once you get north of Oklahoma. Just nice conditions. And then this is the western U.S. So warming up across the southwest and just a nice warm day. But once you start to get into the northern Rockies, maybe a little bit of rain, cooled air in certain spots. But man, once you get out the higher elevations, a nice day, like could hit 70 in Seattle today. So moving forward, guys, we do have severe weather chances to come. This is for tomorrow, for your Friday. We continue to hold on to that marginal risk in Florida, but flow continues to move off the Rockies into the plains. So therefore, we have this slight risk across areas of Nebraska, western Kansas, and northeast Colorado. But we have a very large marginal risk that goes all the way from the Nebraska-Wyoming line and drops all the way down to Arkansas into western Texas. Pretty large corridor that runs the risk of severe weather. Just not, an outbreak look to this, but these can overachieve. Kind of, like I said, one of those mesoscale days where you just have to watch individual storms. They can latch on to different things in the atmosphere. The atmosphere is wild. It's not as cut and dry as what I guess people assume it is. Weather is very complex. But, what's wild is tomorrow's tornado threat is there's not even a 2% risk right now. And I think that'll change. I think they'll put a 2% risk somewhere. But the wind threats, yellow area here, that is a 15% risk of winds exceeding 55 to 60 miles per hour. And the hail threat, same thing, 15% risk of hail exceeding 1 inch in diameter or larger. And then we look at day 3. Kind of the same setup. The ridge kind of flattens, and we'll talk about that here in a second. But now we have a slight level 2 out of 5 risk of severe weather for Oklahoma City and Norman, and western and northern areas of Oklahoma. Slips into a very small section of Kansas. Marginal risk goes all the way from Cheyenne, Wyoming, all the way to Columbus, Georgia. So a pretty large area that at least runs the risk of severe weather for Saturday. Okay? And right now, we just know that there's a risk of severe weather, 15% risk of any severe weather. Now, we go back to this, look at that, look at this, and at day 4, we already have a slight risk for areas of southwest Oklahoma and northern Texas. Wichita Falls, Lawton, you guys are right in the middle of this, but there's probably going to be a large risk area for severe weather for this day too. But just because there's a large risk area of severe weather, that doesn't mean that it's going to be an outbreak or anything like that. So just discussing the pattern, this is the Euro ensemble. It's going to be tough to see what's going on here. I'll say that right off the dot, but this is starting today. Okay. Why are we getting severe weather today? Well, let's get this previous circle off and let's draw on this a little bit. So we got this flow kind of coming off the Rockies, right? And then it dips down dramatically like this. And it's dipping down dramatically like that is because you got an enhanced flow, because flow around this trough that's lower pressure that's delivering all this nasty weather across the Northeast right now. So the flow really accelerates across this area. And this is why we're getting such strong wind gusts across areas of the Southeast yesterday, and we're going to get it today. Really an accelerated flow across this region. But there is a bit of a ridge spiking across this area. Okay, so flow kind of rounds this ridge, and there's some sort of boundary sort of right into here, more so kind of down here today, that's separating moist air with dry air. So just because you see, these slashes of purple and stuff like that, that doesn't mean there's necessarily, I immediately think severe weather. Your moisture is only creeping up to about right in here. So we got just enough, we got enough moisture, But we got just enough of flow right here in this region with this Gulf moisture in place, flow kind of dropping down here to create some overlapping conditions for severe weather. Now we continue to move forward into Friday's severe weather threat, and that ridge begins to flatten into the central and western U.S. So this is tomorrow evening. Still got a lot of flow across this area, but you're lacking other ingredients to get severe weather going. But really, the flow as it kind of goes across the Rockies, very light flow across this area, sort of right into here. It's not a lot, but it's there. You see the wind barb kind of pointing to the west. That means the flow's kind of going across this region out the west. But where's your moisture? That's a big question. We're about to look at it here in a second. Your moisture for this day is, let's go on and look at it. This is the moisture for today. So your moisture for tomorrow's severe weather threat, you got a spike in dew points all the way into the 50s and 60s, all the way. And remember, once you get into the high plains, you don't need moisture at the surface to be super high because you're higher up in elevation. The higher up in elevation you get, the more lower end dew points can get the job done as far as severe weather. So this little slither of dews in the upper 50s, low 60s make it all the way up in the northeast Colorado. That'll get the job done. We had that tornado just outside of Denver a few days back with dew points in the 40s and 50s. So it's just a different ball game in the high plains. But deep tropical moisture right here in Oklahoma down to central and eastern Texas and points east. So the moisture plume definitely gets further north, and you mix that with your flow in the same time frame on the Ural Ensemble, and there's just enough flow in this area to get some storms going. There's a lot of dry air over the mid-Atlantic and the Northeast. So even though you got all this flow going over this region, you're probably not going to get much of in the way of any severe weather. You could get some storms, but I'm not expecting any widespread severe weather. Now you start to move it into Saturday. We do have that risk of severe weather once again, and here's that outlook again for Saturday. Okay, large area, runs to at least a risk of severe weather, right? Okay, so you go back to this and you look at this. This is for Saturday also. So you got flow. Your main belt of flow at 500 millibars, 18,000 feet, is mainly going across this region, but there's a lot of dry air up there. But you got light flow at the bottom southern section, southern flank of this mid-level jet that's kind of going across this region. It's almost a light northwesterly flow, except it's more zonal, west to east rather than north to south. So just enough flow sort of riding up into this region and then kind of cruising back down. And this is overlapping what's likely a pretty moist environment. So we've taken into Saturday. That ridge begins to flatten out. And sure enough, I'm going to flip this right back on the screen. And look, those are the same areas I drew as far as the flow at 500 millibars. It's riding over a decently moist environment, especially that bottom arrow that I just drew. This flow is kind of riding over some sort of boundary separating pretty dry air with pretty moist air. And it's right over the severe weather threat area. And sure enough, if you bring this back up and you look at Saturday's severe weather threat, and I'll pull that back on your screen, well, that doesn't match up well because we're zoomed in a little bit more. But you get what I'm saying. I was trying to do something cool there, but it didn't work out. But it makes sense that this is where your best risk of severe weather will be, because when you look at dew points, that's where your best moisture will be, overlapping enough flow to get the job done. Now, going beyond this point, guys, what it looks like to me is it gets a little bit more complex. So we start to get into Sunday. There's a severe weather threat too there. Just enough flow, overlapping a pretty moist environment in this region, but not a whole lot. And then after that, one thing that I want to watch is we might have just rounds of scattered to strong to severe storms. I don't see any big events as we get into early next week. But one thing I do want to watch is a trough. Area low pressure tries to develop over the eastern U.S. And then we'll start to get some flow over the eastern U.S. I want to see, you see how I'm putting my cursor over this area? It says, 25 to 35 knots of mid-level flow. I want to see if we get any severe weather across this region as we're getting into the end of next week. And that's just something that I definitely want to watch there. But as far as precipitation outputs in the short term, the flow, I know we always focus on severe weather, but even on, say, the more stable side of this, and when I say stable, that doesn't mean no storms. It just means no higher risk of severe storms. So as let's back it up a little bit. As we're getting into tomorrow, we're still going to have rounds of heavy rain in this area. Like, I know it's kind of hard to see on your screen, but those colors of green and orange and yellow, just kind of hanging out, congealed over the same areas right here where Kansas, kind of Missouri, Arkansas, and Oklahoma come together. So this is getting into Saturday. Here comes another round into Saturday night into Sunday, kind of just rounds of rain kind of going over the same areas. And then eventually, as we're getting into kind of the end of this weekend, we start to get a very stormy pattern just setting up. But just because it's a stormy pattern doesn't mean that we're going to have crazy risk of severe weather. But I mean, you got this area right here that kind of scoots off the Carolina coastline. And, we start to get into Monday, and it looks like an active pattern sets up for the south as we're getting into early to midway next week. And I think that's because a trough develops across the eastern U.S. So after that, everything just kind of gets everywhere, and that trough really begins to show up late next week. And you just got to watch for some higher and severe weather threats across the eastern U.S. next week. But because of these consistent rounds of rain through Memorial Day weekend, this is between now and 7 a.m. Tuesday, several inches of rain, like I said, right where Kansas, Missouri, Arkansas, and Oklahoma kind of come together, over a half a foot of rainfall could fall between now and then. That's a lot of rainfall, guys. And just taking a closer look at areas a little bit further east, even into Tennessee, northern Alabama, northern Mississippi, a pretty active pattern can get going. Well, it just supports rounds of thunderstorms over this area. So we just got to watch this. Could have a higher end flooding threat that materializes right now. There is a slight risk at day 3 getting into this weekend. That's Saturday, I believe. So, and really just to wrap this up, what's driving all this is, first off, cooler air. We got a stormy situation ongoing right now through the weekend for the Northeast. Eventually that lower pressure in the blue will move out. The warmer colors you see on your screen, like the yellows and the oranges, higher pressure. So we stop it here. This is Sunday morning. The Storm Prediction Center mentions a lot about zonal flow. And it makes sense because there's no huge dips in the jet stream as we're getting into this coming Sunday morning. It looks like the lines are just kind of going more so like this, right? But there's still going to be embedded pieces of energy in different places. I'm just drawing X's in different areas. Still going to be embedded pieces of energy. Now, one thing I want to watch, you see this kind of white color right here? That could be just an embedded impulse of energy, lower pressure. And this is just a Euro ensemble too, so it's kind of a smoothed out ensemble look, averaged out look. So one thing I want to watch as we're getting into midway next week, you see that blue showing up over areas of the Midwest, the Great Lakes region. It's an area of low pressure, a trough, dip in the jet that's going to show up. So what's going to happen here is I think that our flow is going to shift just like this, or like that. And I think that this could bring a pretty active, unsettled pattern eventually for the eastern U.S. as we get into around this time next week. Big trough shows up. Not only is this going to keep cooler than average temperatures around, it's going to keep the possibility, especially around the base of this trough, the possibility for a pretty active pattern as pieces of energy kind of drop down from this ridge into the main belt of flow at the bottom edge of this trough. So I think this big blue blob is going to do something interesting as we're getting into late next week. We just have to watch. It's going to continue to keep cool temperatures around too. This is between now and I think through this is between the 27th and 31st of May. Cooler than average temperatures in the blue, warmer than average temperatures in the red, and warmer colors you see. So a cooler pattern sticks around, and you look at the precipitation outlook and it matches up with what we're seeing with this trough. We got above average chances of precipitation, and it makes sense because in this time frame, if a trough kind of sets up sort of around this region right here initially, then our flow is going to get slung down into here, and that flow is where we're going to have active weather. So it actually matches up well with the Climate Prediction Center outlook. Now, I think this trough will continue to influence our weather in the eastern U.S. through the first couple of days of June, too. But that's it with that. We're going to read a passage of scripture for you folks. And let's go on and pause this. And it's 7:09. So we got a few minutes, so no rush here. This morning, we're in Psalm 37. Psalm 37, verse 7. Be silent before the Lord and wait expectantly. I can't speak. Be silent before the Lord and wait expectantly for him. Do not be agitated by one who prospers in his way, by the person who carries out evil plans. It says, do not be agitated by one who prospers in his way, by the person who carries out evil plans. So it goes back to what, I talk about a lot, and that's trusting in God's plan, trusting on his will on your life, not praying for your own desires. Normally your desires are probably earthly desires, and we all do that. It sounds like I got a cat behind me. Oh, that's just Nadia. Nadia's cool. But, it's important to pray for his will in your life. And it's easy to get wrapped up in our own desires. And it is very easy. And listen, part of my testimony and the path of me still growing, because I'm still growing, is looking over my shoulder at other people. And some of it has been in my own family. And just being agitated that, other people seem like they got it easier than I do. And I'm sitting here praying, trying to do what's right. And it just seems like it's just easy street for this person over here. And that person over there might be somebody that you're very close to. And, who's to say if the way they're doing things is evil? I don't know that. Maybe it's the wrong way of doing it. Maybe they're not. Maybe they're just following the ways of the world. And we see that often everywhere. All these people there's a lot of big people out there that are not living the right life. We'll just leave it at that. And as far as worldly stuff, they're doing well. But we know that we're not supposed to live of the world. So just remember, and I got a couple things here. We're called, allow that passage of scripture to really shift your perspective. You got to trust in God's plan, and don't be swayed by the appearance of earthly success. And I was doing some research on the internet with that too, and a couple people's ideas and thoughts on this definitely made this verse come together a lot more, so that I'm reading some of that. But it really speaks to that well, guys. And it says true prosperity comes from a relationship with God, not from worldly possessions or achievements. So I hope that helps. Just pray for his will in your life. And as I know I say that so much, but I'm so huge on that. And I pray for his will in my life and everything. I was doing it this morning on the way home from the gym. I've been speaking on this a lot. I've been conflicted on what I should do with this channel, to be honest with you. And, and should I take it to another level? Is me wanting to take it to another level driven off my own desires? Is it something that God is calling me to do? What is it? And I've been praying over that and praying. And that's the thing, is sometimes when you pray, he's not going to give you that answer immediately. I almost say it like this. He wants you to kind of marinate over it for a while. And through you waiting, you learn a lot, guys. You're meant to. I'm telling you, everything connects. All the dots are meant to connect. And he made it like this for a reason. As I grow, I see that more and more with my own eyes. So pray for his will in your life. Trust in his plan. Trust in the prayers that you pray to him. And things will begin to open up for you. So God bless all y'all. Stay safe today. And we'll talk to you again tomorrow morning.